The After the Affair podcast with me, Luke Shillings, is here to help you process, decide, and move forward on purpose following infidelity. Together, we'll explore what's required to rebuild trust not only in yourself, but also with others. Whether you stay or leave, I can help. And no matter what your story, there will be something here for you. Let's go. Hello and welcome back to the After the Affair podcast. I'm your host, Luke Shillings, and today you're listening to episode number 204. This week, in fact the next 3 weeks, are going to be a little bit different. It's going to be 3 shorter episodes, each one around 10 minutes. And I'm going to look at a particular kind of trap. Not a trap that everyone falls into, but a trap that tends to catch a rather specific type of person. The kind of person who's usually very good at handling things. They're capable, they're analytical, they're used to solving problems. And if that's you, I think this trilogy is going to land uncomfortably close to home. So let's start with episode 1. Why can't I figure this out? You're used to a certain process. Something goes wrong, you diagnose it. A problem shows up at work, you gather the information, you understand it, you produce a solution. That's not arrogance, it's just how you've operated for years and probably pretty successfully. Revenue drops, you look at the numbers. A project fails, you debrief it. Something isn't working, you fix it. This is how my brain works, by the way. Challenges and problems that you come across in the world, the default is to solve the problem. And then infidelity arrives, and your brain, quite naturally, reaches for the exact same process. What happened? Why it happened? What did I miss? What does this actually mean, especially about me? What should I do next? How do I stop this happening again? These are all the questions that quickly pop into your mind, usually plus a whole list more. But of course, all of these questions are without answers. So you research, you read, you listen to podcasts like this one, sometimes 3 or 4 in a row, hoping the next one contains that missing piece. You replay conversations, you look for the detail that you missed, the tone you should have noticed, that facial expression. The moment where, if you'd just been paying closer attention, you might have seen it coming. So you ask more questions, hoping the next one will be the one that finally settles it. You run scenarios in your head late at night, testing different versions of the story until one of them feels stable enough to stand on. At least until the next thought arrives and knocks it completely over again, of course. And somewhere in all of that effort sits a very quiet assumption. If I just gather enough information, I'll understand this properly. And once I understand it properly, I'll feel okay. The problem is, though, that assumption has served you brilliantly in almost every other area of your life, which is exactly why it's so hard to question it here. Look, analysis isn't the issue. You're not doing anything wrong by trying to understand what happened. The issue is somewhat quieter than that. Some problems aren't solved by obtaining enough information, because they were never actually that kind of problem in the first place. A puzzle has a correct answer sitting in it somewhere, waiting to be found. You just need enough pieces. But betrayal doesn't work like that. There isn't just some hidden answer that, once it's been located, makes the pain resolve. You know exactly what happened, exactly why, in forensic detail, and still feel exactly as unsettled as you did before you knew anything at all. I've had people that I've worked with who have had almost entire case files documenting all of the text messages and emails and the times and the dates and the things that were said and the things that didn't match the things that were said. But this isn't a court case and there's no external jury to make a decision, which is exactly why you can still feel just as unsettled as you did before you knew any of this information at all. Maybe you're not struggling because you haven't figured it out yet. Maybe you're struggling because you keep treating something uncertain as though it were a puzzle with a correct answer. I think what's actually happening is analysis feels like progress. It feels like you're doing something, which is, really preferable to sitting with something. Sitting with something means feeling, and feeling often doesn't feel good, so we try to get away from the feeling as quickly as possible. Sitting with something is, although very uncomfortable, is usually the thing that moves us forward. But because it doesn't seem that way, the mind keeps generating more questions. Not necessarily because the answers are needed, but because asking feels safer than simply experiencing the pain underneath that question. There's a real difference between a problem to solve and an experience to navigate. A problem has a very clear, defined endpoint. Once solved, it's done. You can file it away, closed. And then you just move on to the next thing. An experience, though, doesn't work that way. Grief isn't solved. Betrayal isn't solved. They're moved through, slowly and often unevenly and a little bit messily, regardless of how much information you gather along the way. You can know every detail, time-stamped and confirmed, and still wake up tomorrow feeling exactly as raw as you did before any of it was confirmed. The tragedy is that the very skill that's making you successful everywhere else, your ability to think your way to a solution, for example, becomes the thing that keeps you circling here, mistaking motion for progress. You're not lazy, and you're not failing. You're just applying a genuinely excellent tool to a job it was never built for. So here's a question I'd ask yourself. The next time you catch your mind spiraling into yet another round of analysis, am I actually trying to understand something new? Or am I using analysis to avoid sitting with a feeling I haven't let myself have yet? That's not a criticism. It's an incredibly understandable substitution. Feeling hopeless is uncomfortable. Thinking hard feels like doing something about it, which is exactly why it's so seductive. Because you've already asked the question, you've already turned it over a dozen times, and yet nothing new is arriving. Only the same conclusions, just dressed up slightly differently. It might be worth noticing that you've left the territory of understanding and entered the territory of avoidance, just dressed up as diligence. A useful test is to ask yourself whether the next round of thinking is actually likely to produce new information, or whether you know already, deep down, that it's simply going to produce the same loop one more time. If it's that second one, that's not a sign to think harder. It's a sign that thinking has quietly stopped being the very tool that helps. You don't need to solve this. I know that sentence probably lands quite strangely, given everything that you've built your competence on, but some things aren't solved. They're carried for a while until they get lighter. And the moment you stop demanding a final answer from yourself is often the exact moment the actual healing has room to begin. Next week's episode picks up a closely related thread. What happens when the very fact that you're struggling starts to feel like evidence that something's wrong with you? If today resonated, I think you'll want to hear that one too. And if you'd like proper support working through this, that's exactly the kind of work we do together inside my one-to-one coaching, supported by the After the Affair Collective. You can find out more at lifecoachluke.com or drop me an email, luke@lifecoachluke.com. I'll speak to you in a week's time. Take care of yourselves. Bye.